Hello ladies and gentlemen, let's see if I can find that. Excellent, so that's sorted. Good. Let me just move that over there. Cool. So we are a few minutes ahead of time. I'm just going to swap back to there, and there we are. So hopefully we are now all set to go for the live. I can see that there are some people who have joined me. Could someone let me know whether they can hear me, because I haven't got a clue whether you've got sound or not. So if someone could put a comment and tell me, that would be lovely. And Nico, can you hear me, darling? Because I've got the sound switched off of it on everything, so we don't get an echo. Rosa, hello, good evening. Thank you for joining me. We're getting a good number of people coming in, which is cool. Let me move my glasses out of the way, as I don't need those for crafting. Thank you, Nico, for letting me know that you can hear me. That's much appreciated. So we are a little bit ahead of schedule because I am always paranoid about things failing, and so I always like to go on early, and then if anything happens I can change what I'm doing, which makes life easier and hopefully keeps everyone happy. It's really nice to see that I've got a lot of people with us this evening. I'm going to be making an altered book box, and I've chosen some Stamperia rice papers to work with because I sort of think that this range, which is our way, and of course Pentart sells it, has an autumnally vibe with its browns and its oranges and its burgundies. Hello Sheila, thank you for joining me this evening. It's very much appreciated. We are still a little bit early. I think that Facebook won't tell people until dead on 6 o'clock, so hopefully more people will get their notifications at that point in time. Of course, it's never quite guaranteed, is it, what Facebook will do, but hopefully that's what will go on. But I don't want to start making until at least we have some people here, because I don't think it's fair to start ahead of time, because people like to see things from the beginning, although of course it is available to watch at any stage, and will eventually migrate onto the Pentart's YouTube channel. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm based in the UK. This live will be in English because my ability to speak any other language is severely limited. My bad, I know, but there we are. So it is. So we're just on 6 o'clock now. So I shall start. So I have one of the Pentart book boxes here, which I rather like, and partly because it's a nice substantial piece and it's made from wood, although I have to say that I'm not going to take advantage of necessarily of the wood texturing today. I am merely using it as a nice solid base, because I think if you're going to make a home decor piece, then it's worth doing that. And one of the things that I've learned is that if you heat labels up, you melt the glue slightly, and with a bit of luck that will then make it really easy to lift that off. And it's a trick that actually I only found out relatively recently, so I think it's always worth sharing little tips and tricks as we go. I'm not seeing any more comments, so I've no idea if anyone else is commenting, but hey ho. So we're going to make this box from scratch. I will leave some of it to do later on, particularly its inside. So I Does that work on jars? Yes, Sheila, it will work on jars too. It just softens the glue and will make it easier for you to lift it off. So I'm working today with Pentart's primer paste, which is a form of gesso, and I'm using it at this point really because of its thickness, and I have got a really stiff haired brush. The Italians call it a Sandarino brush, I think, rather than it being an ordinary brush. In the UK, Aniko, it's quite difficult for the Pentart products. There are several companies that stock them. The biggest one, Dali Art, has a sale on at the moment, so that's always cool. But that's unfortunately that's because she's closing down, which is not so cool. But take advantage while you can, because you might as well. And the other thing to note is that that's Crafty have them in the UK, which is also helpful, but that's a limited range. And there's a company called Dawn Bibby Creations, Dawn was really the reason for many UK people starting out in crafting. And she's recently started working a lot with Pentart products, and she's going to be helping me bring them to UK television, Selly Teleland. So if a lot of the products that I'm actually using today, Aniko, will be on the Create and Crafts website for my show on the 3rd of September with the products in the country. So that will again make life hopefully a bit easier. Now this is one of the reasons I'm using the gesso here is actually I'm wanting to take advantage of its texture to give me almost faux book pages. I'm just putting on a reasonably thick layer of that, and then just going to swipe my Sandarino brush through it to give me that. And the book box obviously will allow me to do things, and I can tidy up the inside when I want to, which I might do after the live, but we'll see how we get on, because this is quite a big project to do from scratch, and I find that projects are never maybe quite as good as they would be if I wasn't making them on a live, where I tend to get a little bit flustered, be very much aware of the time, and also not want to keep people here forever and a month of Sundays whilst I carry on crafting. I live in my craft room, but and craft prolifically, as many people will know. But so there we are. So as I say, I'm putting a relatively thick layer of the gesso on, so I can use my rough brush to give me some faux lines there, and those will be much more obvious once the book is dry, and also I'm going to add some paste into them. So I'm just going to tip that onto its side, because it's a bit of a challenge, isn't it, doing these things. So this is the top of the box. In fact, for the moment I can pop that flat, and I'm going to be adding some rice paper to this, and obviously that's great. If I was just to pop my rice paper onto the brown box, it has the hue of the brown box through it, whereas if I pop it over on the white, you can see the line where it's much brighter, so you get more truer colours of your products, of your rice papers, if you do that. If you're doing a rustic autumn project, it probably doesn't matter, and I'm just going to swap so I don't have my Sandarino brush because I don't need to take advantage now of the rough bristles. I just need to get a cover of my gesso over the box to do that. Good evening, Anthony. Thank you for joining us this evening. Hello, Eva. Thank you for joining us. It's much appreciated. I never quite know how many people are going to join us, and you know, it's a bit of an odd time in the UK. It sort of coincides with people still getting home from work, families collecting children from nurseries and the like, but there isn't really an ideal time. Whatever time you schedule a live for, someone somewhere will be busy doing something else. So I think it is really just a question of doing the live, making sure it's saved, and then of course people can watch back at any time. For those of you that weren't here at the start, I've got a nice decent sized wooden book box, and I am just using the Pentart primer paste for this because I wanted it for the sides of the box to give me some faux page effect, and so rather than getting out a separate primer, I'm using my gesso to do that, which of course makes complete sense. Hello Lynette, thank you for joining us. It's lovely to see people. Maybe people could say where they are around the world. I know Sheila's probably in Canada, if I remember correctly. Anthony, I know you're in the UK. Hello Anna Deco Art, thank you for joining us this evening. That's lovely. I won't comment on everyone because knowing me, I won't be able to see everyone. So let's just pop that around the edge of there, and I've just got some edges that I just need to cover, but as ever you miss bits as you go. That's fine, because these pieces will get covered ultimately anyway. So there we are. Let's just make sure that that's covered, and that's reasonably covered. And let me turn that around, and we'll cover that, and then I'm going to give this a quick dry before I have a mess, because that's not a good look. And then I can carry on with the next thing. One of the lovely things about... Hi Sheila, sorry, why did I think you were in Canada? I hope that Scotland is not too bad. Hello Jill, thank you for joining us this evening. Yeah, it's a reasonable number of watching for a live in English on this site. It's never so easy, I think, for people to watch when it's not their first language. So Norfolk's a beautiful part of the country. People might think it's flat. I have to say, as a junior doctor many moons ago, I did some jobs in Norfolk, and spent many a pleasant evening on the Norfolk Broads in there, you know, just relaxing when off duty, courtesy of the fact that lots of the doctors that worked in the trust had parents that were GPs, and they had their own boats, which make life very easy for people. So you don't really want to stick it together. So let me just give this a good dry, otherwise we will have box edges stuck together, and I will decorate the inside of the box long term anyway. I'm sure there will be another Sheila that I know, or in Canada. The Broads are absolutely beautiful. So there we are. And as ever, I can see bits that I have missed, so let me just open that up a little bit and pick up the areas that actually just need a little bit of attention whilst the going is good. It's easier to do it now than it is later on, and I'm sure that, like most of you, actually that's what happens when you're crafting, isn't it? You find you think you've covered everything, and actually you've missed bits, and you have to go back to sort it out. But that's okay. That's just what life's about, isn't it? So hopefully, can I spot more bits I've missed? Yeah. There we are. Cool. And as I say, I'm not going to decorate the inside of this on the live unless we've got lots of extra time. I do have a plan for it, and if we've got a reasonable amount of time, then we will do so. So let me pop there. Hello Barbara from Hungary. So I hope you've had a reasonable day. It's not been too hot over there. I know that most of the lives on the Pentacolor page are in Hungarian, and rightly so too, but it is good for those of us who don't speak Hungarian but love the Pentacolor products to be able to learn about them during during a live from people who just like to play with them. And it's one of the joys of being on the creative team, that we can share our product knowledge and hopefully help people along the way. Though of course actually all you need to do in reality is go onto the Pentacolor YouTube page, and there are always lots of videos on there. If you put into the search box the name of the product that you're wanting some help with, then actually you'll find almost certainly a YouTube video showing them. Don't make a mess, work with clean hands. I just can't manage that. So let me just, how on earth did I get it halfway up my shoulder? So cool. So I'm going to pop that over there, and I want to put my base colour. Now, because I'm using the universal crackle, I'm actually not going to add primer onto the rest of the box, because I'm putting multiple layers on anyway. Of course you can do if you want to. It is at the end a matter of personal choice. If you're only going to put one layer on though, then it's important that you do prime, because otherwise you may need to use a lot more of your paint. So I've swapped to a matte acrylic paint. This one is called Bourbon. I don't know that it looks particularly like American bourbon whiskey, but it is a beautiful dark burgundy bready brown, and I picked this because I felt it worked with the colours in the papers, and these will ultimately show through, so that's the cracks, so that's why I've chosen to put this on as my first layer. There we are. So we just have to sit here and carry on and do this painting, which will take, it takes as long as it takes really, doesn't it, because you can't really speed up that. There we are. And I'm going to put a paler layer on, so I'm not too worried about it going up over the top of the onto the top where I'm putting the rice paper, because I'm going to cover it anyway. Hello Timmy, thank you. Tame? I don't know if you could put phonetically how we say your name, that would be super. As I say, I am challenged when it comes to using people's names. So there we are. I'm conscious that the gap in between, because it's a beveled edge where the hinges are on this box, will need to be painted, but I want to get on to getting my crackle component on, so it has a chance at least to start drying naturally before I take a heat gun to it. But there we are. So the crackle medium I'm going to be using is the Pentacolor one component crackle medium, and I describe this as a PCP project. So you put your paint, a layer of paint on, then you put your crackle medium on, and then after that, once that's dried, you then put your top layer on, and it will crackle almost immediately with a bit of luck. It's always a bit more fickle, I find, A, on a live, and B, when you've had to force dry things. I'm rather hoping that that might now be dry enough for me to wriggle my brush into there. I'm not into taking things apart. It's not my forte at all. But, and of course, if you're upcycling furniture, then you would take everything apart, and you could sandpaper, sand everything down in between the layers, because the technique I'm showing is one that would work equally well for upcycling a project, a piece of wooden furniture. So there we are. She says gooing everything up, so hopefully that's there. And I can now separate that out so it doesn't glue together. There we are. We pop that down like that. Then, that's the headache with boxes, isn't it? Is you end up with a big area, but there's not much I can do about that. And I think I might have had this pot of paint a little longer than perhaps was prudent. Maybe not. It's thickened up a little bit. I don't like adding water to it, but I do have another pot, so it's not such a problem. And of course you can add water to thin it down if that's what you want to do. There we are. I don't like waste, so let me just grab this and give it a little good squirt and see if we can make it a little less like polyfiller for those of you that are in the UK. So there we are. So that's better. I'm not getting quite such thick layers, and it's covering far more manageably for me. There we are. That's definitely better than it was. Hey. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. As I say, so for those of you that are in the UK, I have a Create and Craft show on the 3rd of September at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So that is Saturday of this week, and it is, so if people are at home, short of something to do, it's a reasonably good time of the day for a show, I think. It's quite important that we support things and shows and buy from our retailers, because without the retailers, the brands wouldn't survive. So that's really important to do. It doesn't matter where you buy from, just support the local retailers that you have, because, well, they say it's what keeps companies going, isn't it? And that's really important that we do that. So we might get around here eventually. Good evening, Anthony. So who are you saying hello to? Oh, you're saying hello to Angela, and I think Julie Rankin joined us. Julie makes beautiful projects. She is on the Dawn Bibby creation design team, and so she will be playing with products via Dawn, who is beginning to supply and have in her shop more and more products, but she doesn't have all of them, and I think in the UK it's very much about shopping around. So Create and Craft's a good place to go if it's there. That's Crafty, Dawn Bibby, Dali, while she exists, is also a cool idea. So there we are. We have a layer on that. So now we'll, and mucky fingers. Ho! Why not? Why not? We will give this a clear. So this is a red, really dark red, almost brown. It's not quite brown. But I just want to get some of these the layers on before I so we can carry on through as we go. because otherwise we'll be here at tea time if I don't get some at tea time tomorrow, and that's not what I'm aiming for at all. And as you can see, even though I didn't put any primer on this before starting out, actually one layer of the paint has covered really well, and that's testimony to the quality of the paint and the amount of pigment that is in the paint itself. I just need to have this dry, because what I want to do is put the rice paper on next, and then the crackle medium onto here. As ever, have we managed to get it all? Have we? No. There we are. So let's pop that there. Unfortunately, I've got a reasonably nice quiet heat gun, so hopefully that makes life easy. And then we can pick that up, find the right brush, and we'll just add some paint to the areas that we've managed to miss. As I say, it's not so important, but I would rather not have natural wood crackles showing on my finished project, so we will cover everything as much as we can. There we are. So that can go over there. Let's take that away from my mouse. My computer mouse. I don't have a real mouse in here, thankfully, because otherwise I might be going out the room screaming. They're not one of my favourite creatures in this world. So what else has everyone got planned? I guess most people are at work and are now off for the evening. But I hope you've got some nice crafty things planned for the next few days, no matter what it might be. I live in my craft room, having retired from work about 8 months ago now. So, which is important, you know. So I craft pretty much every day, and then, like a mad fool, I decided I needed to get fitter. So what did I go and do? I joined a local gym and decided that I would do an aqua aerobics class. Wow, heffalump in the water springs to mind, but onwards and upwards. It's only going to get better with a bit of luck. Hello, Agnieszka. You don't want a no, I definitely do not want a Mickey Mouse in my craft room. Thank you very much, Anthony. I really would run a mile if there was a mouse in here. We're back on to quite a rural area, but I've never seen any field mice. We've had squirrels raiding the loft of our garage, and causing havoc, munching through Christmas decorations and lights, which wasn't very helpful when I went to get them out one year. But yeah, but I haven't seen any in the house. We do have a lovely family of badgers who come to visit, which is really nice. We quite often see mum, dad, so that mum and her babies coming up into the garden. And there we are. Right, hopefully that is now dry. So, now then, I have a beautiful piece of rice paper that I have cut to size, and there we are. So the next product that I'm going to be using is the Pentacolor decoupage varnish and glue. Now this is the matte one, which is my preference for things like this, but if you want a more shiny surface, then use the shiny one, and obviously if you want a glittery surface, use the glitter one, which is really subtle, but actually totally beautiful. You're in the middle well, thank you, Sheila. If you're not part of the Crafty Surgeon, which is my group on Facebook, please ask to join, and please, when you've made them, post your makes on there, because I would love to see what how I've managed to inspire people to make things, because actually that's the most important thing for me. As you get older, I think it's you appreciate that actually passing on skills is something that's really important, because if we don't pass on skills and knowledge, then actually the next generation don't know what to do, and I really don't see the point in letting them have it, trying to make them reinvent the wheel by having to do it more often, go back and forth. So I'm putting a good layer of glue onto here, as you can see. You're welcome to invite any of your other crafty friends as well. That's always welcome. I tend to post my makes on my own page, but also onto there. So but I wanted a forum where people who could post the things that they were interested in, as I've acquired quite a lot of crafty friends, and there we are. And I think it's nice to be able to share what interests us, and people can ask questions. So because I had such a good layer on there, and I have pretty much cut my rice paper to size, I can now literally just smooth that out over there, and hopefully I won't end up with too many bubbles. It is slightly bigger, and I will take a file to that. The glitter one is really, really pretty. It's quite a subtle glitter, I would say. It's not blingy in your face, but it's there, and I've made a few Christmas decorations with it, because Christmas is definitely a time for bling, isn't it? And it works absolutely beautifully for that. So I would say it's worth hunting out. You can always, Julie, ask Dawn to get it in for you. I'm sure she would. I've already had it on Create and Craft, so it might be a while before I get it to go back on there, but you never know. So the Pentacolor decoupage glue is not only a glue, but it's a sealer for your work, and that's really important. I'm going to be using some laser gels on here, and I do want to be able to lift them off and not necessarily stain my whole piece in a very dark colour. So that's why I'm making sure that I really do cover this properly. And generally I would recommend 2 layers, and then the chances are if you've missed 1 layer, then actually you won't miss it with your second layer, but we might forego that second layer tonight. We'll see how I feel a bit later on, but it's a good habit to do, particularly if you're going to get out anything for aging and distressing. Now I'm going to have a piece at this end, of this side, that I know I'm going to need to to sandpaper off, and that's fine. I won't do that until this is dry, because otherwise the paper will just yeah, I'm surprised Dawn hasn't, but maybe she hasn't known about it. I mean, she is definitely the queen of bling. There is absolutely no doubt about it. She's certainly got the other decoupage mediums in place. And for those of you that are still short of something else to do, on Dawn Bibby Creations tonight, Lorna Angwin, I happen to notice, is going to be using some rice papers and a project using the Pentacolor Deluxe paste. So that's another group that you're welcome to join and see what the design team there are up to. So there we are. Hopefully that is a good coating of that over there. Right. So this is now reasonably dry. So I now have my crackle medium. The glitter decoupage glue. To be honest, Julie, I've not tried it. I can't see why it wouldn't work just as well on paper to give a very thin you know, a very thin layer of very subtle glitter. What I will do is I'll find the pieces I've done and then tag you in a post with them so you can see what they're like. Things. So this is the one component crackle medium, and I love this very much. It's a very different crackle to the fine line crackle I used on the yogurt pots. The bundle on Create and Craft has the classic crackle, the one component crackle, and also the fine line crackle. So if you're working your way through what's there, then that's what's coming to, you know, the Selly Telly. So let me see if I can get another layer onto here. Now I'm a great believer that in crackle mediums actually being left to dry on their own rather than force drying. So we'll see how quickly this will dry in my conservatory. It's not as warm as it has been, so it might take a while, and you don't need a particularly thick layer of this medium, which is very thin, so it covers quite well. And I've managed to get white where I don't want it, but hey ho, we'll carry that. It's lifted off the glass mat, I think. There we are. Let's flick those bits of white off as much as we can, and it's probably not going to matter too much in the grand scheme of things, because as I say, we're going to add another layer, and I know that the next layer is going to be ivory anyway, so it won't matter too greatly if it's not. There we are. I tend to use ivory rather than white. I don't know why, but it is definitely my preferred paler colour. I think it's softer. I think white can be sometimes a bit garish, but again, it's, of course, you know, it's everyone to themselves, isn't it, and what suits them. So I hopefully have a reasonable layer of crackle medium all over that, and no great big runs, because it will show. There we are. So I am going to tuck that safely down on the floor and lid my medium. Hello Blanche, there's no need to be sorry at all, darling. We all have a busy lifestyles and things to do. I'm in the process of decoupaging a box using some of the Stamperia Our Way rice papers. Let me just clear this up. Yeah, I am a muppy pup when it comes to crafting, it has to be said. Yeah, I definitely like ivory, Anthony. I think it's just softer than a white, but again, it's what you prefer, isn't it? There we are. I'm only doing this because I was picking up all the white bits I've picked up onto my box, and I probably should have done it first. There we are. And then we have a dirty rag because they're more healthy, that are more suitable for using things. Now then, so at the start, 1, 2, 3. Have I got everything? Yes, I have. Cool. That's always a good start, isn't it? So I have some resin pieces here, and I started, and I have made, you know, some things to them because again, it's about taking your time. Now when I'm choosing you can see I've got white, something that's been white gessoed, and I've got something here that's been black gessoed. And the reason is that if I'm covering a project with a dark paint, then I like to use the black gesso as the base colour, I find it intensifies the colour of the paint that I put on top of it. If I am using a pale colour on top, then I use the white gesso for doing that. You could use bonding fluid and then paint on top of that, but you know, gesso will work reasonably well. And of course I've picked moulds, I don't know if you can see them, that have masses of detail on them. They are they're not Stamperia ones, but they're readily available. There we are. And you always miss bits, I find, when you're adding gesso. It often takes me 2 or 3 goes because the light shining on them doesn't help. So I'm just going to give these another coat of this, and then we'll give them a dry. I won't know whether the white one's covered, but we'll worry about that. The paint should stick to it because I used a brand of resin that says you can paint straight onto it. And obviously when you're adding gesso to a detail mold, you don't want to add thick layers of it because otherwise you'll clog up all of the detail. So there is definitely a balance to be had when you're doing this. There we are. So so I've got embellishments here for the front of my box and also the spine and the back of my box. So there we are, hence the assorted collection. There we are. I think that one might be reasonable. There we are. I'm sure, Anthony, you can say which put in the chat the brand of the moulds. I'm sure you know exactly which ones they are. Gail, don't you worry. That I think that, you know, it's really difficult, isn't it? The internet does its own thing. It's variable in different parts of the country. Streaming is definitely hit and miss. So don't apologise for only just managing to get here. It's not a problem, is it? The live will be recorded, and so you can come back and watch it at any point that you want to. That's assuming, of course, that you do want to come back and watch it, but yeah, who knows? Why does, you know, white gesso, black gesso gets every single wear, doesn't it? Hopefully. Hopefully we're not too bad. So my plan, so that people sort of know where I'm going, is this is going to go on the front of the box, followed by the clock with the big moth on top of it, because moths to me are more autumn and evening or nocturnal than butterflies are. So that's why I chose the moth rather than going and finding a butterfly mould. And obviously if I leave these as this, they're just going to jar, and that's not what I want them to do. So I have got some, I'm going to colour the big frames with the board on anyway, but whilst that black gesso is drying, I'm going to add on top, you can see the difference. So I'm going to have the dark red, and then this one is reddish brown matte acrylic paint for the let's get the one that's already open and hope that it's not thick like the Bordeaux was. Well, I don't know why I kept that one, but hey ho, you know, each to their own madness, I guess, because there's almost none in there. There we are. In fact, let's just bin that whilst the going is good and revert to the first pot we picked up. Yeah. There we are. Let's just leave that. Now I tend to leave my seals there so that I can pop them back down, and that I find helps keep the paints in better condition, particularly in very hot weather. So I'm just now going to add a layer, and it might need 2 layers, we'll see where we go with it. So I'm layering my colours, and like this, I'm being led by the colours that were in my rice papers when I'm doing this. Well, that's the intention with what we're doing. There we are. So, thank you. That's a lovely thing for you to say. I live in fear when I'm doing lives. Not because I don't enjoy doing the live itself, but I live in fear of technology failing me. Because if it can go wrong when it comes to a computer, it's going to go wrong for me. And that's just the way it is. But I think we've managed to master OBS, which is lovely. Only for, I think, Pentart to be changing soon to StreamYard for a whole host of reasons, which will mean that people will have to let StreamYard know, give them permission to comment, so we know who is actually watching our lives. Otherwise we don't see what's going on. There we are. So I don't know how well it's shown, but because this is on white, you can see almost the white through. So that's the paint in the pot, and that's the paint painted out, and that's because I've done that onto white gesso, which is fine, because that was the intention. I'm wanting to build my layers and my colours. And the moth I'm going to link back to my box, so I don't want that to be that. I'm going to layer that. So this is the acrylic ivory matte paint. Anthony, you are lovely. I am getting better. I am getting better and less fearful. I didn't even have to have any help today to go live, and didn't even manage to have a panic attack in the process, which is really good news. So there we are. So there it is. Make sure I've got all of the edges covered. There we are. That can go in there. And we're going to give these a little bit of a blast dry. There's only one way of doing anything like this, isn't it? You know, and that is taking the time and making things and doing things real time. And I hope that by doing things almost real time, it shows that once you've got an idea for a project and are used to your mediums, then actually it doesn't need to take forever and a month of Sundays to come up with something that you can be really proud of. I do understand that for some people the idea and the concept might be a harder thing to do, but I think that globally it's important that we do take things step by step. So, has anyone got any questions to ask me whilst I am standing here with a heat gun just drying the paints? It's quite important, I think, to make sure you have got them properly dried, not just skim dried on the surface, because if you then try adding the surgels and wiping back, if you've only got it skim dry on the surface, then actually sometimes you'll pull off the layer below, which isn't what I want to do. There are always ways of doing it. Yeah, I think you're not alone in having having that happen, Gail. So let's see if I can find the brush I used the Bordeaux on. That'll be that'll be that one. Hey, hey. So, as I say, I know that I was wanting to add these and layer them. And this way I am actually getting a really nice, dark, deep, rich colour. Whereas if I pop this red onto straight onto a white gessoed surface, then I don't believe it would have the same intensity. And it's a good trick and a useful thing to know how to alter that. You know, you can get there, but you just then end up having to put more layers on. And that's obviously more product overall. So if you can do it with one layer, then that's cool in my book, and it's also one step less, which means it also takes a little bit less. Let me just move over here and put that pot into the middle of there. So I will get away with one layer coverage here, whereas on my white gessoed piece I'm going to definitely need another layer. But there we are. Lots of painting in this project. I'm not afraid. I think that's just what you have to do. If your acrylic has properly dried, Gail, then no, it won't lift straight the paint off at all. It's the Lesueur gels that will lift it, that tend to lift if you haven't got it settled back down, and that's because you're needing to add you take the Lesueur gels off with a damp cloth. So clearly if you've got a product that is still wet and then you take a damp cloth to it, you're going to lift that product off, aren't you? So the waxes don't. If you do want to lift wax off a project that because you've overdone it, then you need to get actually the Pentacolor transparent wax, and that will help lift off wax in the wrong place or if you've overdone it. So it's about knowing your products and understanding how they work, and what works together and what doesn't work together, I guess, is the honest answer. So there we are. And after the live, there's no question about it, what I will do is I will find all sorts of areas that I've missed, because that's what happens, isn't it, when you're painting. You miss bits. There we are. But this frame is lovely, really delicate. Really got lots of detail with it, which I think is again a good thing. There we are. We might have got round that one, possibly, maybe. There we are. Don't ask me why I decided to do a project that's got 19 dozen moulds on it. And if you think this one's taking a while, the one for tomorrow on Crafting Together with All Brands has got even more moulds on it, because I'm a glutton for punishment. But hey ho. There we are. Oh dear, oh dear. You see, when I'm working, I like stuff up to my face, so moving it off screen is not very helpful for you, is it, really, when you're watching? Please, if I'm off screen, someone tell me I'm off screen and let me know that I need to move back so you can actually see what I'm doing. Not that there is any skill at the moment in covering an intricate mould with my Bordeaux paint. Well, there you are. Eek. So lots and lots of steps, but I think that many of the projects that we see actually consist of lots of layers, lots of to build us depth and interest, and I'm not too sure that texture is the right word. It's the word I hear used a lot, but texture to me is not a flat surface. It's a particular bugbear of mine when I hear crafters saying, we've got to look at all that texture, and when actually what you've got is lots of beautiful layers, lots of detail and lots of interest, but a completely flat piece of paper. but hey ho, that's because my father was an absolute stickler for using the English language in the way that it was intended to be used. Now these moths are going on the side of the box, so hence they're going to be in the Bordeaux colour. But any dark red that you've got would work. But all that, even, you know, there are lots of different brown shades in the Pentart ranges, so any one of those darker, you know, you just need two that are tonally different for it to be as effective when you're stacking them on the top. She says, singing to herself. That's a dangerous trick too, isn't it? Because then sometimes Facebook gets upset that you sung a song and then it thinks that you're breaching some form of copyright rule. And hopefully no one would recognise it, but yeah, we're getting there. So those are covered with one more. Don't know whether how, you know, Pentart always allow a fairly generous amount of time for their projects for us, which is lovely. I have to say I do find it a challenge when some of the groups only want an hour, because for a mixed media multi-layered piece, an hour is pushing it really in terms of the time that's allowed. Right. So this piece, which is the reddish brown on the white, you can see is quite mottled in its appearance, and that's not what I want, so I'm going to give that a second coat. That might be the right one. Yeah, that will be the right brush. So we'll just, and you'll see the difference that the second layer adds to this, I think, which is why sometimes you're better off adding a dark layer underneath. I just felt it might be too dark because this is a mid-toned brown, but I tend to like things where I particularly when I'm painting moulds, where I add as few layers as possible, because each layer fills the holes that little bit. There we are. And this will then look more solid, which will give a nice effect. So let's pop the lid on that, and we are going to add another layer of the cream to our moss, or the ivory, so it's solid. And endeavour not to flick the ivory paint all over my brown moulds, because that's not what I want. There we are. That can go there, that can go there. Let's clear some space. That can go there, that can go there. Those we don't need, that we don't need. Right, dry time it is. I haven't seen any more comments for a little while, so I'm assuming that everyone is happy, that I haven't sent people off to sleep, because that wouldn't be a good thing to have done, and that you're following my assorted steps as I go. think that often projects like this don't really all come together until you start adding everything together. I sort of have an idea and a vision in my head, so I'm rather hoping that it will come off, because I don't like nowadays doing a whole project once and then repeating it for live. It just it means I have way too much. What am I using? This is just a Ranger heat gun. The molds are Finnabair molds from her latest release, Gail. Baroque frames, moths, and the clock faces are the ones I've got here. Thank you, Anthony, for telling me you're still here, and for Julie for telling me that you're still watching. That's lovely. And sometimes, you know, lives are a bit like crafting on your own, with Billy Nomes. So having to, you know, carry on a conversation for as long as you do on a live is interesting. So, now then, let me just see. Right, I'm going to pop those over there to cool down, because they're quite warm, and that means that the resin's quite flexible. I'll pop that over there for the moment, because miracle of miracles, the box is not quite dry, but it's almost dry. So I'm just going to give this a little waft and get the rest of it dry enough to add that. Yeah, the clocks and the frames are really lovely to use, Gail. You know, one of the, you know, if you do stuff for Penta, then you've got, you know, lots of products, lots of pastes, mediums, paints, and they're all really good quality, you know, professional quality paper materials. But that means that they are really, really versatile and will work with, you know, lots of other companies' products. I'm watching the dishes too. I can't type. Oh, well, is it sort of middle of the day for you, Blanche? Lunchtime-ish? I know that you're behind us, aren't you, in terms of time over in Mexico? Right, so hopefully, having let that crackle medium, because the crackle medium dry mostly naturally on there, it's now going to behave for me. Now, how you put your coat of paint on over this will determine actually the types of the cracks that you get, and my preference is to use a dauber, and it's also, so I've just literally got a sponge dauber here, and I'm going to pop my paint onto it. I'll squidge a whole mountain onto there so I don't have to, and then I can add more as I need to. So we'll start on the back, and literally all I'm going to do is cover it, and I'm being very careful not to go over areas more, because if you go over areas, you need a good amount of paint to do this. If you go over areas, then actually you can lift the crackle off, which isn't, and this, by tapping it like this, you'll get quite a fine effect and fine crazing as it dries. If you use a brush, then you tend to get thicker crackle and more linear crackles in the lines, you know, sort of almost in the lines of your brushes. So pays your money, takes your choice, use the technique that works for you. I can see that that is already beginning to crackle, and I want that around my edge, so there we are. We'll pop that around the edges there while we're at it. Let me top that. There we are. So that can go there. How did I get burgundy paint on my rice paper because I'm a mucky monkey. And I had to be fairly careful there. 1 PM I have to cook too. Oh dear. The joys of being a mother, I think. So there we are. I can see it's already crackling on the back of the box. So in a minute I'll turn it back so that you can see what's going on. So as you can see, even having done that, it's not, and said it's right. It is reasonably warm here. I'm not going to pretend it's not reasonably warm in the UK, in the craft in my conservatory at the moment. But it's it dried reasonably quickly on its own. Now then, of course, I've still got on that side. I've got the paper I need to take off, but there we are. We'll worry about that after the live. There we are. And I'm just bringing it in at the edges to soften the edges of there. So that's all entirely intentional. So there we are. I think you can see quite happily there that my crackle paint has crackled. There are still some areas that are drying. So that can now go back down onto the floor next to me, just whilst we tackle these pieces. So I have some Laser gels here and a whole mountain of waxes. So this is the pine Laser gel, and I'm using this because I want it to sit into the cracks of my piece rather than and so I can lift it off the surface rather than it being all on the surface. So that's the intention. Now it's important with this because this will act as a seal, and you can, if you want, just put it straight onto the bare resin and it will leave it to dry. But if you try and lift it off once it's dry, it doesn't shift. So better, certainly in hot climates, to add a little bit and then get a wet or a damp cloth and just lift off the top there. You can see that, see here that it's leaving it in the debit. Gail, I am on Saturday at 3 o'clock, 1 o'clock even, Saturday the 3rd at 1 o'clock, and I have a live tomorrow in Crafting Together with All Brands with more of the products that are on the show. So people will be fed up with me this week and then I shall go silent for a while, but yeah. And I've deliberately chosen the pine to coming back to that autumnal theme that I was going for, and the colours in the project that I'm dealing with. There we are. So let's just wrap this. I don't know how in focus it is for you. That's better, I think. I've not got my glasses on, so it could be alright and I wouldn't necessarily know. It's important that you swap to clean areas of your cloth, because otherwise all that happens is the bit that you've wiped off, you promptly wipe back on. Strange that, isn't it? But it sits in all of the nooks and the crannies of the detail, and it's giving it an aged appearance, which is what I wanted, and a more sort of almost autumnal look. Doesn't have to be completely perfect. It makes a huge difference, I think, Sheila, and there are not that many products that you can use in the same way. Now you can paint the Leser gels onto dried air dried clay and wipe that back to leave the white surface. So the Blanche, the other, not this time that she's been on, but the time before, was using it on lots of her moulds, and she said on air that she'd used I think it might have been the ebony, so that instead of you having to dry brush masses of white paint onto the top of moulds to get the white look, or the white grey tone look, you can actually have the white clay, then add in the ebony Leser gel, and then wipe it back, and leaving you with the natural white clay on the surface. It's probably better that you let the clay dry first and give it a coat of varnish before you do that. But again, it's another technique, isn't it, that can sometimes make life easier. So it looks like I'm being extravagant and I'm putting lots on and wiping lots off, but actually I'm not using masses of product in doing this, and it really does completely age my frames, completely change them around, and I think you get a shabby vintagey feel to it, which was what I was wanting to do. So there are lots of different colours, some of which are not available in the UK, but I particularly like the ivory. I like the walnut, which will add a darker tone, and I love the cherry, which on wood or MDF actually makes it look almost like mahogany. It's really effective. There's a pale pink, country pink, country blue, a country green, ebony. There are a couple of greens. Oak is actually a dark green. Thank you, Anthony, because you are rather the mould expert, aren't you? But this is a good technique, I reckon, for the moulds, and I'm no doubt might end up being blamed for you having a new obsession and you having to get them, but they do work rather brilliantly for this. All right. So there we are. Now then, what colour do I want? So that is going to sit on there. You get that? Not that it really matters at this point. So that will sit on there. And I think I'm probably going to, because I can't see what I've done with it, I'm going to go again. I'm actually going to go with a darker tone. So this is the walnut. So I'm going to make the depths of this one this sort of almost greeny brown colour, to leave the colour, the brown, popping on the surface. You could use the ivory and go pale, I guess is the answer to that one. Now these, the Leser gels will stain wood quite happily. They'll stain MDF. You can use them through stencils with a tabbing motion, and you'll get a stained effect. They're a gel, so you can put them through your thicker stencils, and then you'll get a raised stencil detail. They work brilliantly for splatters, it has to be said, and they dry with a degree of dimension, which again I think is is an interesting effect. So, and they will colour blend beautifully, so I think it's worth experimenting with them. So for a product that's got you can antique with it, you can stain wood, you can stencil with it, you can give dimensional stenciling with it. Here we are. So that has added that. I will be adding waxes, so that's darkened that off, and there's now less of a colour contrast between the two, which was what I wanted. Now then, And this is the cherry, and as I said, it will colour blend for me. So let me just grab a clean-ish brush. It's always good to have a clean brush, and I'm just going to pop a little bit of that out on the surface and a little bit of the yellow out on the surface, so I don't contaminate my pots, because I'm really good at pot contamination. I'm really good at confusing myself by not putting this on. I think these are absolutely worth having in your crafty stash. I have to say, I totally do. So I'm going to pop the red. You can see how, you know, how close it might be to that border colour in the centre, and out a little bit. And then I'm going to pick up some of the and I shall fade my colours out, so I'm getting a different look. And I really do want some proper yellow at the edges, so let me just grab, so I'm not blending my colours too much, and this way I'm going to get sort of the earthy tones colours that a moth has, but them grading through, hopefully. There we are. So I've got a mixture of those on there. So, and if I just cover that back and wipe it back, you can see just how different my moth has become now, just by layering my colours together. So those now all need a little bit of a dry. And for those of you that are getting fed up with my witterings, you'll be delighted to know that we're getting there now. But those definitely need to have a dry before I can add any waxes on them. So if you added the ivory onto this, you'd have the letters out in, you know, would stand out as brown, and the background would be ivory coloured. That's, yeah, but they just work. It's just very different, and I say I love them, and I love the colour mixing that you get and that you can achieve quite happily. I'm rather thinking I might add just, do I want to? No, I'm going to leave that, otherwise we'll be here with me tinkering till the cows come home. So let me pop those over there, those over there. I think that just needs a bit more of a blast. It's not completely dry. So this is the box that we crackled, you know, and it has crackled beautifully. Just needs to proper dry before I pop it down. I actually want to decorate this inside of it, the pages. So when I started out this live, oh, she says putting her hand in wet paint. When I started out the live, I started out by using the Pentacolor primer paste through with a textured brush, and I'm hoping that it'll give me a sort of faux book effect. Where can you buy the Resurgals? So there are several places in the UK that you can buy the Resurgals from. They will be appearing on Create and Craft on Saturday, so the products will be loaded onto there. If you want to wait for that, they are in stock at That's Crafty at the moment. So I can see quite happily, but I guess that it might not be so easy for you, that where I had the where I've used the brush, the thick coarse brush, I've got lines and variation in depth. So we're just going to carry on I'm going to pop that into there. So yeah, that's Crafty have them in stock, or some of the colours in stock. Dawn Bibby Creations have got them in stock in the UK. Create and Craft have got them in stock. So I can't tell you others. I'm sure there will be other, you can see now that I haven't had to do very much work, but I've now got sort of a faux book page look on the edge of my box. It's such an easy thing to do, and it just gives you that texture, and you can take back while it's wet as much or as little as you want, so don't be afraid of adding it. Because I haven't let my sides of my box dry properly, we are getting a little bit of pickup of the paint, but we'll worry about that. It's all resolvable. Most things are, aren't they? There we are. There. So we'll just wipe that back. What you want is a damp cloth, not a sopping wet cloth for doing this with. But it'll sit in the lines that you created with the brush, which I think again makes life easier. So I find that this works quite nicely. It's a good technique, and I prefer using these to an oil-based product because it's more environmentally friendly, less smelly for starters, and it means I can wash everything up with soap and water afterwards. So that's good wins in my book. So there we are. There we are. So Anna, I've answered for the UK. If you're in the States, then Royal Courts have a list of their suppliers, and they have lots of they distribute to lots of places. So if you went onto the Royal Courts website, that would take you to a list of their retailers, and that will make life easier. There we are. We'll just add where we've managed to lift that. So my box now has some book page ends. I've taken too much off there, so we'll just lift that. I'm heavy-handed. You're in the UK, so have a look on Dali Art, because she's in the UK, in London, and she's probably got them on offer at the moment, because she's in the process of shutting down. Right, cool. So I would not do this if I wasn't on a live, okay? Let me be very clear. What I'm about to do, I would not do if I wasn't on a live, and that is use a hot glue gun, okay? I would use my heavy body gel matte for the next steps, but I want an instant hold, so that's why I'm choosing to use this now. So, but as I say, that would not be my choice for permanence. This is the product that I would normally use, okay? And I'm popping this sort of central. I've got some words that help get it in line, because I want my and I've picked up white paint there, but hey ho, that's on the surface on there. Now I know that I want to put my clock on the top of there, so I have, she says, a piece of cardboard that I conveniently cut to size, so that can sit into there. And then I'm going to pop my clock, hopefully with the numbers up the right way, in the centre there. And then I can add my bug there. And then I have some wax. I've actually picked up the bronze here, so I'm going to add just little bits of the bronze onto the edges to bring out the details. Of that mould. And again, I think you get it's that instant transformation from adding that next layer of detail onto your piece, because I couldn't see that I had all the numbers going round that clock face before I did that. I want a different colour on my moth, so I'm actually going to use the gold to add some colours onto that. There we are. And again, it just knocks it back that little bit, adds another colour, so it begins to bring them all together. So this has come off where I hadn't let it dry before I've touched the surface, so that is purely speed, and because I haven't let it dry. So don't be tempted to paint, just dab a little bit of extra on, because otherwise you will regret it. Now then, and I have my 3 moths to go on here, so there we are. Again, it would be a gel medium job, not a hot glue job. And my OCD, I'm afraid, requires me to put them all in the same sort of direction. And we'll just add a little bit of wax over the surface of those. And there. Hopefully we can turn that over. You can see what's happened here, but we are less worried about that because we can tap into it. You'll never get quite the same effect, but it's important to know how to fix things, isn't it? And it is purely because, as I say, I've moved when I shouldn't have done. I should have let it dry. Now then, so I have a piece of rice paper from a different rice paper collection. This is how to use as many papers as you possibly can all in one go. I'm just going to pop that sort of onto there. And hope that it's reasonably centralised. Cool. Just pop that on the back of there, and I'm going to use this, and I will probably have to re-glue this. Now again, off alive, I will put this on my box, let it dry first, and then add the frame afterwards. So I'm being slightly naughty here by doing it this way round, but you don't need to be here until Christmas time. There we are. And that's sort of in the middle. So we'll pop that down, pop that there. And later on you could fill this with, once it's completely dry, with some pouring glaze, or you could add some fine line crackle. The choice is up to you. It definitely would be easier, I think, to let it glue down first. There we are. Thank you, Anthony, for that link. And then I've chosen the gold for here because gold is the colour I've used on the top of everything else. So there we are. So ladies and gentlemen, that is our completed project, start to finish, in just under an hour and a half. I think that it's not bad, so let me turn that over. So there is the front of our box, there is the side, and because I haven't glued it down properly, let's just do it. We'll stick this down onto here. Thank you, Anika. I'm glad you like it. I have to say that it's not a complete mystery to me when I finish the project on a live, but I don't have them, you know, I don't nowadays completely prepare a project and then recreate it, partly because I haven't got room for keeping all of the projects, and partly because I'm confident enough now that I can do it. So there we are. So thank you, Julie, thanks very much. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to let that dry. I will add gold wax around the edge of my box, because I think it will look more opulent with, if I just, you know, add the gold wax around the edges. There we are. But for tonight, I think that's probably enough for everyone. So thank you very much for joining me. I have to say that I've enjoyed making this evening, and for those of you who can face me watching me again tomorrow, please join me on Crafting Together with All Brands at 7 o'clock, where we'll have a very different project together. Thank you, Jill. I just think it was bringing in autumn gently. For those of you that, well, most of you won't know, if you would like it, Jill, you are welcome. Jill is the mother of my daughter's boyfriend, so it's not such a random suggestion. Just let me know and I'll send it round next time Jenny comes over. So there we are, our completed project, late summer, entry into autumn. So that's all for tonight. Take care, and I will see you either tomorrow or when I next do a Pentacolor Live. Bye.